My name is Jason, and I want to share with you a story that turned my life upside down. No, this is not another tearful melodrama or a pretentious saga about the search for the meaning of life. Rather, it's a comedy of situations with elements of a thriller and a pinch of spice. Well, you be the judge. It all started a couple of years ago when my mother-in-law Sandra once again complained about her pesky admirers. I must say Sandra is a prominent woman. Tall, stately with lush curves, and a mane of fiery red hair. Kind of like Marilyn Monroe in retirement, only with a character fiercer than a dozen dragons from Game of Thrones. So after her divorce, Sandra was literally basking in the attention of numerous suitors. Either flowers are slipped under her door, or a serenade is sung under her windows. And once a particularly zealous cavalier even arranged a fireworks display in her honor. Only there was a hitch. He mixed up the address and almost burned down the house across the street. My wife Amelia, usually as calm as a boa constrictor, only waved her hand at these stories. Like, it's her own fault, shouldn't have provoked men with cleavage and short skirts. But at some point she apparently got tired of listening to her mother's complaints and said, "You know what, Jason? Maybe you could keep Mom company at some events? Be like her escort, and maybe these clingy suitors will back off." I nearly choked on my coffee at such a suggestion. Me, as a bodyguard for my mother-in-law? Thanks, dear, you've done me a favor. On the other hand, I couldn't leave Sandra at the mercy of fate, and the wife would never let me live it down later if I refused. "All right, honey, you've convinced me," I sighed, mentally calculating what sacrifices I would have to make for the sake of family peace. So I became the defender of the fair lady, without even realizing what I was getting into. Oh, if only I had known then what it would all turn into. I would have thought 100 times before agreeing to this adventure. But apparently, you can't escape fate, especially if that fate is your own mother-in-law. The first time I accompanied Sandra to a charity evening at the local country club, I put on my best suit, polished my shoes to a shine, and even tried to tame the unruly curls on my head. After all, escorting a lady, even if she is your mother-in-law, obliges. Sandra met me in full dress, in a tight-fitting blue dress flowing to the floor, with a mind-blowing cutout on the back. Hair styled in an intricate updo, diamonds sparkling on her neck and ears. In general, a beauty. Ready for the cover of a glossy magazine right now. "Well, my little protector, ready for exploits?" Sandra winked at me, taking my arm. "Always ready," I reported cheerfully, secretly hoping that the evening would pass without incidents. "Yeah, right now." As soon as we entered the hall, a whole flock of tipsy suitors swooped down on Sandra. One vied to praise her dress, another shoved a glass of champagne under her nose, a third was already pulling her to dance. I was even confused by such pressure. "Excuse me, gentlemen, but the lady is with me tonight." I tried to impersonate an alpha male, puffing out my chest like a wheel. The cavaliers grumbled discontentedly but did not argue. Instead, they began to drill me with evil looks, like the milk on his lips hasn't dried yet, and he's already encroaching on someone else's territory. I mentally prayed for the evening to end soon, but it was not to be. As soon as Sandra and I made a round of the hall and exchanged a couple of social niceties, another suitor appeared on the horizon, long as a pole, thin as a match, and with a mustache a la Dali. "Oh, Sandra, my soul, there you are," he sang in an unpleasant nasal voice. "And I've been looking all over for you. Would you care to dance?" "I'm sorry, Albert, but I've already promised a dance to my companion." Sandra smiled politely, clinging tighter to my elbow. Albert surveyed me with a disparaging look and hissed through his teeth. "Is that so? And where do you get such boys from, darling? Why, they could be your sons." I nearly suffocated with indignation. Did he just call me a boy? I'll have you know, I've been an adult for 5 years now, but Sandra didn't let me open my mouth. "You know what, Albert?" she said in an icy tone. "It's none of your damn business who I dance with and who I choose as my companion. And my boy, by the way, will be better than some, so keep your insinuations to yourself and go get some air." Albert's mustache drooped from such a rebuke. He snorted angrily, spun on his heels, and dashed off, creaking his patent leather shoes. I stared at Sandra in admiration. "Wow, you sure shut him down, just like in the movies." "It's nothing," Sandra waved off. "I can smell these peacocks a mile away. Okay, let's go dance or something, otherwise we'll waste the whole evening." and we whirled in a waltz to the sounds of the orchestra. I clumsily stomped in place, trying not to trample Sandra's feet, and she only laughed, deftly maneuvering between the couples. Gradually, I relaxed and even began to enjoy the process. Here in Sandra's arms, I felt surprisingly calm and cozy, as if it should be. "You know, Jason," Sandra suddenly said, looking into my eyes, "you're great. I didn't think you'd do so well." "Do what?" I didn't understand. "Well, how so? Fending off these vultures from me all evening. I even feel calmer when you're around." "Oh yeah," I grunted. "Happy to oblige, boss, although some specimens are quite persistent." "Tell me about it," Sandra sighed. "If you only knew what it's like, when everyone looks at you like a piece of meat, like they're about to grope you or drag you off somewhere. So thank you, from the bottom of my heart." And she smiled at me so sincerely that it took my breath away. Damn, she really is a beautiful woman. And how come I never noticed it before? We drove home in silence, each thinking their own thoughts. Sandra was dozing off in the passenger seat, and I kept glancing at her furtively, thinking that I seemed to have fallen. Since that evening, we've become much closer, and I caught myself thinking that I couldn't wait for the next mother-in-law protection mission, not yet realizing what it would lead to. For the next couple of weeks, Sandra and I lit up all the social gatherings in our backwater. Theater premiere? We're there. Opening of a new gallery? Of course, in the front row. Charity auction? Can't do without us. Sandra shone. I played the role of a formidable bodyguard, and I must say we did a pretty good job. Gradually, even the most unbreakable admirers began to back off, not daring to mess with me. No wonder, when such a big guy looms over a fragile lady, you willy-nilly start to think. And Sandra and I just laughed and winked at each other, like, "Did you see how cleverly we pulled it off?" But then he appeared, the evil genius, the Joker of our Gotham, the main boss in the game, Get Sandra. His name was Steven, and he was a lawyer, which kind of hinted it's more expensive to deal with him. But did that stop me? It all started quite harmlessly. A couple of times Steven hit on Sandra at events. She politely brushed him off. He bowed out. But then the script changed. Bouquets of flowers and gifts were replaced by intrusive phone calls and text messages, then visits to her home and work. And once Sandra found a box with a dead rat and a note, "You will be mine," on her doorstep. That's when we got really scared. Sandra was beside herself, and I was seething with impotent rage. Well, what the hell, huh? What kind of freak is hunting my Sandra? I mean Sandra. Damn it, go figure out these family ties. We filed a police report, but they just threw up their hands. They say, nothing criminal. At most, we can scare him with stalker antics. But Steven was not one of the fearful. Apparently, he decided that his lawyer's immunity really did untie his hands. And then what we feared most happened. One night, Sandra called me in a complete panic. Someone was breaking down her door, and she was sure it was Steven. I raced to her in record time, but the uninvited guest had vanished without a trace. But Sandra herself was whiter than a sheet and shaking like an aspen leaf. "Jason, please don't go," she sobbed, clinging to my jacket. "I'm scared to be alone." "Hush, hush, I'm not going anywhere," I cooed, awkwardly stroking Sandra's back. "You want me to stay the night? I'll sleep on the couch in the living room." "Really?" She raised her tearful eyes to me. "You'd do that? For me?" "Of course," I shrugged. You're not a stranger to me. I'm responsible for you." Sandra sniffled and smiled weakly. And then she suddenly hugged me around the neck and pressed her whole body against me. It took my breath away from this closeness. "Oh, Jason, what would I do without you?" she mumbled somewhere into my collarbones. "You're so reliable, so familiar." Her last words made my heart skip a beat for some reason. Familiar, then? Interesting. Can a mother-in-law be familiar? Or is that from a different opera? Anyway, I crashed on the couch to sleep, but I tossed and turned half the night without sleeping. All sorts of strange thoughts were spinning in my head, and my soul was in turmoil. And for some reason, the more I thought about Sandra, the stronger one completely inappropriate feeling became. I couldn't really... No, that's some nonsense. I'm just worried about her. That's why all sorts of nonsense is getting into my head. In the morning, I'll wake up, laugh at myself, and forget it. Yeah, right. Morning is never kind. Especially if you've been staring at the ceiling all night, fighting indecent fantasies about your own mother-in-law. So when Sandra woke me up, perky and fragrant with freshly brewed coffee, I just groaned and covered my head with a pillow. "Hey, sleepyhead, get up," Sandra sang, unceremoniously pulling the blanket off me. "Breakfast is getting cold." "You made breakfast too?" I was amazed, not realizing where I was in my half-sleep. Then it dawned on me that I was a guest, and moreover, had spent the night here to protect the hostess from a violent suitor. "Okay, Jason, get it together. You're a grown, responsible man, not a snotty youngster, after all." Somehow, I opened my eyes and trudged to the kitchen. Sandra was fluttering around the stove, humming something under her breath. In the light of day, her last night's fright seemed like a bad dream. No trace of panic or insomnia. However, I suspect my face had imprinted the whole range of nightly experiences. "Wow, Jason, you look like you haven't slept a wink," Sandra grunted, looking me up and down. "Did my humble person not give you peace?" I laughed nervously and buried myself in a cup of coffee. "If only you knew, Sandra. If only you knew. But the mother-in-law doesn't need to know about it. I'm not suicidal, really." Breakfast passed in awkward silence. Or rather, it was mostly Sandra chattering away, and I grunted monosyllabically and kept quiet. Wild thoughts were jumping in my head, and my heart was pounding like crazy. My mother-in-law's tight leggings and sheer top didn't help me concentrate at all. Finally, Sandra seemed to suspect something. She set down her cup, looked at me intently, and asked point blank, "Jason, honey, is everything okay? You're not yourself? Did I offend you in some way?" "No, not at all." I shook my head hastily, choking on a croissant. I just thinking. Well, about all this, about Stephen, about your safety." "Oh, that," Sandra drawled and sighed. "Yeah, not a pleasant situation. Thanks for not leaving me alone. It's very manly of you." She covered my hand with hers and squeezed it lightly. That innocent gesture sent shivers down my skin. "Okay, Jason, slow down. Don't you dare, you hear me? Don't you dare think about what you're thinking." But it was too late. The dam burst. Everything that had been building up inside me these weeks, admiration, tenderness, the desire to protect and cherish, came pouring out in an uncontrollable stream. Not realizing what I was doing, I leaned forward and pressed my lips to Sandra's in a kiss. It was like a lightning strike, like a nuclear explosion, like the big badaboom, damn it. For the first second, Sandra froze, and I was already prepared for the inevitable slap, but instead, she suddenly exhaled and reciprocated the kiss, running her fingers through my hair. What happened next was like a blur. Greedy touches, feverish whispers, the rustle of discarded clothing. Somehow we made it to the bedroom and collapsed onto the bed, not interrupting the crazy dance of lips and hands. The whole world ceased to exist. There were only the two of us, naked, intertwined, burning. It wasn't just good. It was incredible, mind-blowing, transcendentally beautiful. I couldn't get enough of Sandra, her scent, taste, the feel of her heated skin. And she drove me crazy with her whimpers, writhing beneath me and whispering insane, tempting things in my very ear. I don't know how long it lasted. An hour? An eternity? I only remember that when we finally fell exhausted onto the crumpled sheets, the sun was already shining brightly outside the window, and my head was pounding with only one thought. What have I done? And how the hell do I live with it now? Sandra was the first to break the silence. Propping herself up on her elbow, she looked into my face and asked quietly, "Jason, do you regret what happened?" I swallowed and shook my head. "No, Sandra." "Strangely enough, I don't regret it, even if it's the biggest mistake of my life." "And now what?" she whispered, barely audible, as if afraid to scare away the moment. "What do we do?" "I don't know," I admitted honestly, "but I know exactly what we shouldn't do. We must not, Amelia must not know." Sandra bit her lip and nodded. "Yes, of course, Amelia, her daughter, my wife, the one we just betrayed in the most vile way." Inside, a nasty feeling of guilt stirred, but I forcibly pushed it away. "Later. All later. Now we urgently need to decide something." "Listen," Sandra suddenly said, resolutely shaking her head. "Let's just pretend for now that nothing happened. We'll continue in the same vein. I'll play the helpless sheep, you play the stern bodyguard, and then we'll see." "Okay," I nodded slowly. "I guess that would be best. We'll keep it all a secret and pretend that, Well, there's nothing between us. Sandra smiled at the corner of her mouth and stroked my cheek. I snorted and pulled her to me. Great plan, I must say. Too bad the heart can't be commanded. For the next couple of weeks, we really pretended that nothing had changed. Sandra appeared in public exclusively under my convoy, occasionally pressing tenderly against my elbow, and from the outside we looked like the perfect couple, a prim aunt and her faithful squire. In reality, at every opportunity, we would twist into a hot tangle of bodies, tormenting each other with kisses and caresses, making love so furiously as if it were the last time. I still get goosebumps when I remember those stolen moments, in the cloakroom of a restaurant, in the closet of a country club, once even in a car in a supermarket parking lot. I knew it was all wrong, that with our every action we were betraying Amelia, destroying our family. But damn it, how good it felt to be with Sandra. For the first time in many years, I felt alive, desired, madly in love. Next to her, I seemed to have become 10 years younger, and the whole world began to play in new colors. Of course, my sudden euphoria could not go unnoticed. Amelia began to look at me with suspicion, asking why I was so happy lately. I had to make excuses with some ridiculous tales about successes at work and good mood. My wife seemed to believe it, but the residue remained. As for Stephen, well, after a couple of awesome hours spent with your mother-in-law, you kind of forget about the potential threat. Moreover, he quieted down and no longer bothered Sandra with his antics. We already decided that we got off easy, relaxed. Yeah, right. As soon as we let our guard down for a moment, Stephen struck. He ambushed Sandra in the parking lot after another one of her girls' nights out, grabbed her, tried to drag her into the car. Good thing she had the sense to spray him in the mug with a can and fight back. When she, trembling and tearful, burst into my house that evening, I nearly lost it. I barely restrained myself from smashing everything to hell and rushing at Stephen with my fists. But Sandra begged me not to. She said we shouldn't attract attention, or Amelia would certainly suspect something. And I gave in. I nodded obediently, listened to Sandra's jumbled story, stroked her tangled hair. And in my head, it was pounding. We need to decide something. It can't go on like this anymore. Either we fight back against this freak or we part forever. There is no other way out. That night, we made love again. Quietly, desperately, almost hopelessly. As if realizing that it was for the last time. That soon we would have to make a choice, one way or another, to put the dots on the i's. And I was afraid, terribly afraid of that moment. At dawn, already getting ready to leave, Sandra suddenly hugged me and whispered in a trembling voice, "Jason, honey, if nothing works out, know that I love you. I really love you." It was as if a lump got stuck in my throat. Unable to utter a word, I just held her tighter and squeezed my eyes shut. Sandra, Sandra, my girl, how we got into this mess, and what am I supposed to do with it all now? The next day, the hour of reckoning came. At the family dinner in honor of Amelia's birthday, we all gathered at one table. Me, my wife, her parents, and a bunch of relatives I had seen for the second time in my life. Sandra sat across from me, pale and tense, hardly touching her food. Our eyes met again, and each time it was as if an electric shock went through me. "Mom, Dad, I have news for you," Amelia suddenly announced in a ringing voice, rising from the table. Everyone fell silent in anticipation. "Jason and we're having a baby. We're going to have a little one." A deafening silence reigned at the table, and then such an enthusiastic hubbub broke out that my ears were ringing. Relatives jumped up from their seats, rushed to hug us, showering us with congratulations and joking advice. Amelia was beaming, stroking her still flat stomach from time to time, and I stood there as if struck by lightning, unable to comprehend what I had heard. A child. Amelia and I are going to have a child. I'm going to be a father. And Sandra will become a grandmother. Damn, how complicated it all is. I shifted my gaze to Sandra, and my blood ran cold. She was sitting there, whiter than a sheet, gripping the edge of the table with whitened fingers. There was such pain, such agony in her eyes that my heart nearly broke. Next to her, her ex-husband was fussing about, saying something joyfully, but Sandra didn't seem to even hear him. Catching my gaze, she shook her head almost imperceptibly, like, "That's it. We're done. We have to end this farce before it's too late. And I realized that she was right. We'd gone too far, got bogged down in this swamp of lies and betrayal. It's time to get out before we drown completely. That same evening, I excused myself, citing fatigue, and went to my room. But in reality, I called Sandra. I said that we needed to talk seriously and asked her to come. She agreed without hesitation, and half an hour later she was already standing on the threshold of my room, hugging herself by the shoulders, shivering. "Come in," I invited, stepping aside. "Sit down. We really need to discuss something." Sandra nodded silently and sat down on the edge of the bed. I sat down next to her, taking a deep breath. "Well, with God's help. Be a man, Jason." "Sandra, listen. What's happening between us? We can't go on like this anymore. You understand we can't lie, hide, betray our loved ones. It's wrong. We must stop this madness." "That's it. I said it." Sandra was silent for a long time, staring at one spot. And then she said quietly, barely audible, "You're right, Jason. I understand everything. It's just, I'll miss you so much. God, how I'll miss you." Her voice broke, and she burst into tears, bitterly, inconsolably sobbing. My heart was bleeding from these sobs, but I held on. I awkwardly hugged Sandra by the shoulders, pulled her to me, letting her cry it out. She buried her face in my chest, shaking all over, and mumbled through her tears, "Forgive me, Jason. Forgive me for dragging you into all this. You deserve better. You should be happy. With Amelia, with your baby. And I'll manage somehow, I promise. I'll survive somehow." "Hush, hush." I stroked her back, feeling a prickly lump rising in my throat. "We're both good. What can I say? It'll be the right thing to do. Better for everyone." Sandra pulled away, nodding convulsively. She wiped away her tears, tried to smile. "Of course. You're absolutely right. Don't worry, I'll just miss you, that's all. You've become very dear to me, Jason. Thank you for everything." She got up, smoothed her crumpled skirt. She took a deep breath, straightening her shoulders. "My girl, strong, proud. That's how I'll remember her." "Well, I'll go, I guess. Don't see me off, okay? It'll be better this way." I nodded, unable to utter a word. It was as if a black hole had opened up in my chest, sucking out all feelings except a dull, aching pain. Sandra smiled at me warmly and sadly, one last time, and then she resolutely headed for the door, and a moment later her heels had already clattered down the stairs, retreating from my life. Forever. That's it. The right choice has been made. Now I will have a wife, a child, a respectable family life, what I've always dreamed of. But why does it feel so shitty in my soul? Why does it seem like I just ripped out and trampled my own stupid heart with my own hands? I didn't sleep a wink that night. I tossed and turned on the bed, replaying my conversation with Sandra over and over in my head. And I thought, did I do the right thing? Maybe I should have taken a chance, told society to go to hell and be with the one I love. Or is love just about being able to let go in time, sacrificing yourself for someone else's good? Damn, I don't know. My head was spinning from all these questions, but one thing I knew for sure, there was no going back. Sandra and our crazy, impossible affair were in the past, and I had to somehow live on, raise the baby, take care of my wife, be an exemplary family man, as befits a real man. After all, that's what I wanted, didn't I? Almost a year has passed since my breakup with Sandra. I immersed myself in work, in preparing for the birth of the child. I tried to be the perfect husband, attentive, caring, considerate. Amelia blossomed before my eyes, becoming rounder and softer with each passing day. I looked at her glowing face, her rounded belly, and convinced myself this is it, true happiness. What was worth fighting for? And yet sometimes it would come over me, especially at night, when Amelia would snore softly beside me, and I would lie awake, staring into the darkness. I would remember Sandra's hot embraces, our whispers and laughter, the sharp taste of forbidden passion. Damn, who am I kidding? I missed her. I missed her like crazy, to the point of obsession. But time after time I would pull myself together, forbid myself to think and dream. I have to live in the present, Jason, the reality that you chose for yourself. Sandra and I hardly saw each other during this time, only a couple of times in passing, on Amelia's birthday, and at some family gathering. We exchanged polite smiles, meaningless phrases. We pretended that we were barely acquainted, just relatives, nothing more. And inside me, everything writhed and screamed in pain, as soon as I noticed the fatigue and faded sparkle in her eyes. But life, as you know, is an unpredictable thing. One day, the usual course of things was interrupted by a phone call. Amelia picked up the phone, listened for a couple of minutes, and then gasped and pressed her hand to her lips. "Oh my God, how horrible! Poor Mom!" My insides immediately turned to ice. Sandra? Did something happen to her? I jumped up beside myself, ready to rush to the rescue, but my wife stopped me with a gesture and explained. "Stephen, that psycho who was stalking Mom, he came to her house with a gun. He wanted to shoot her, can you imagine? Thank God the neighbors called the police, and they twisted him right on the doorstep. What a madman! Now he's definitely looking at a decent sentence." I collapsed into a chair, feeling the world around me begin to spin. Stephen tried to kill Sandra. My Sandra could have died, and I wasn't there. Apparently something like that was reflected on my face, because Amelia frowned in surprise. "Jason, are you all right? You've gone so pale." Yes, I'm fine," I managed, trying to pull myself together. "Just a little shocked." After all, Sandra could have been seriously hurt. "Yeah," my wife nodded, thoughtfully rubbing her belly. "Listen, maybe you should go see her. Check on her, cheer her up. Mom has always been fond of you. I think she needs support right now." I froze, afraid to believe my ears. Amelia herself is suggesting that I visit Sandra? It's like she read my mind. Of course I'll go. Right now, immediately. To hell with all the former agreements, to hell with the damn propriety. I have to be there for her, especially at a time like this. "Yes, you're right," I said as calmly as possible, getting to my feet. "I think I will visit Sandra, in case she needs help." Amelia nodded approvingly, and I was already rushing into the hallway, pulling on my jacket as I went. 10 minutes later, I was driving my car to Sandra's house, feverishly clutching the steering wheel. Damn, I hope she's all right. I hope I'm not too late. The door was opened by a pale, haggard Sandra. Seeing me, she gasped weakly and stepped back, letting me in. I stepped into the hallway, and in the same second, she threw herself on my neck, bursting into sobs. "Jason, Jason, God, I'm so glad to see you." I hugged her tightly, feeling the tears rolling down my own cheeks. "Hush, my dear, hush. I'm here, I'm with you. It's all over, you hear? That bastard won't bother you anymore." Sandra only cried harder, clinging to me like a lifeline. I held her close, stroking her hair, kissing her tear-stained cheeks, and whispered some incoherent words of comfort. And my head was spinning with only one thought. I love her. I love her to oblivion, damn it. And to hell with everything, morality, propriety, others' expectations. If today's nightmare taught me anything, it's that life is damn short. It can be cut short at any moment. And postponing it, sacrificing your happiness for the sake of some nonsense, is an unaffordable luxury. So I took a deep breath and, pushing Sandra away, looked into her eyes. "Sandra, listen. I've been thinking a lot about us, about what we had. And you know what conclusion I came to?" She shook her head convulsively, not taking her eyes off me. To the one that I can't live without you," I blurted out, feeling my heart pounding against my ribs. "And I don't want to. Yes, I have obligations to Amelia and my future child now, and I'm not giving up on them. But damn it, Sandra, my heart belongs to you. It always has, and I'm not going to hide it anymore." Sandra's lips trembled, and tears welled up in her eyes again. But this time, they were tears of relief and happiness. She smiled through the moisture on her lashes, and I caught my breath at the incredible, unearthly beauty of that smile. "Oh, Jason, you silly, reckless boy. I love you. I love you to distraction, and to hell with the whole world with what they'll say. We'll be together, you hear me? No matter what." I laughed and cried at the same time, kissing her salty, tear-stained face. My darling, my only one. How long we've been going toward each other, through pain and deceit, through partings and doubts. But now I know for sure it was worth it, because there's nothing more important in life than to love and be loved, recklessly, rashly, without compromise. That's the only way to live. Of course, we still have a lot to discuss and decide. What to do with Amelia, the child, our families. It won't be easy, that's for sure. But I believe we can do it. Together we can handle anything, because true love is worth fighting for. To the end, to victory. 5 years have passed since that memorable day when I raced to Sandra. 5 years full of trials, difficult decisions, and endless happiness. Yes, we had to go through a lot. Explanations with Amelia, rejection by relatives, sidelong glances from acquaintances. But you know what? It was worth it. Today, Sandra and I live in a small house on the coast. I work remotely. She paints. She always dreamed of it. But before there was never enough time. On weekends, my daughter Lily comes to visit us. A nice little girl, the spitting image of Amelia. I love her like crazy and try to be a good father, even from a distance. Amelia and I managed to maintain a warm relationship, although I wouldn't call it a friendship. There was too much pain and resentment between us. But for Lily's sake, we try to keep it civilized. She even found a new love for herself, Patrick. A good guy, reliable. I hope things work out for them. And Sandra and I, we just enjoy every day spent together. We walk on the beach holding hands. We chat about everything under the sun over morning coffee. We make love by candlelight and laugh like crazy with overflowing happiness. This is life, real life, without falsehood, without looking back at others' opinions. Sometimes I think how good it is that everything happened just like this. That fate did not let us pass each other by, miss our chance, even if we had to go through pain and disappointment for this. In the end, we gained much more. A home, a family, understanding, and absolute boundless trust. Something that was so lacking in my marriage to Amelia. Of course, there are no perfect relationships. Sandra and I also fight sometimes, argue until we're hoarse. But we invariably make up, find a compromise, because we understand what we have is priceless. We've come too far to throw it away over trifles. And here it is, the moral of my story. Cherish what you have. Don't be afraid to take risks, to change your life, if your heart tells you it's right. Don't look back at others' expectations and standards. In the end, only you are responsible for your happiness. And if you're lucky enough to find a person with whom your soul sings, hold on to them no matter what, because you may not get a second chance. I didn't miss my chance. I stepped over my fears, told everything that separated us to go to hell. And now I have Sandra, the woman of my life, my other half, my best friend and passionate lover all in one. Isn't that what everyone dreams of? In general, go for it, friends. Love and be loved. Live life to the fullest, to the max, and spit on everything that hinders your happiness. Believe me, it's worth it. Yours, Jason, ex-model son-in-law, former model husband, and an absolutely, incredibly, insanely happy man in love. The end. Did you like this story? Let us know in the comments what you liked. Subscribe to our storytelling podcast. Also, don't forget to like and ring the bell so you don't miss more interesting stories. See you soon.